Today is about my favorite stat, and that is receiver breakout age. I always like to bring context into everything because it'll make the stat better, so it's really adjusted breakout age. And it shows two things best. One, late round receiver steals, and then two, sadly, the opposite of that, which is early round receiver busts. Listed as the top 25 guys in rec yards per game last year. In order of adjusted breakout age, are they an early declare, and then just what round were they drafted in. The main idea of breakout age is the NFL is obviously a step up from college. So similar to the transition from high school to college. If, say, Amari Cooper gets to Bama at 18 years old and is already dominating SEC corners that are juniors and seniors, well, when he has to make that step up again, he's already kind of naturally done that, and it's more likely that he's going to be a success in the NFL. Where the opposite is really the main point is if you have to rely on your age and experience, say as a 21-year-old, and then you finally start producing. Well, when you have to make that next step up, well, yeah, it's less likely that you're going to be success. But specifically for late round guys in terms of being a success and early round guys for being a bust. The two guys that are not in this top 25 that would be Tyreek Hill because he was a utility player in college. He had 3 times as many carries as he did receptions. And then Jalen Waddle because he was injured as a sophomore and a junior, so doesn't really count. The guy that's asterisked here is Puka Nacua because of a COVID season. He would have broken out, aka he was on track when Washington had 4 games played in 2020. So that would have been 18.8. His breakout age is 19.8, so I just put it right in the middle. The biggest outlier is Terry McLaurin. But even with that, if you take into context, it kind of makes sense because one, he was a round 3 pick. It wasn't like he was a round 1 pick. He had a quarterback in Dwayne Haskins that had a very short ADOT, and look at the other receivers on that team. Paris Campbell, very short ADOT guy. Curtis Samuel, very short ADOT guy. And then he still had Chris Olave too. So the fact that he didn't really hit that as a downfield player with a bunch of other NFL talent and a quarterback that just threw a bunch of screen passes, it kind of makes sense. This shows the strong correlation between your breakout age and then your early round bust potential. Round 1 to 3 receivers in the last few years that had a breakout age of over 21. Basically, are they breaking out as a senior year or later? Brandon Ayuk up top, obviously not a bust. He is that outlier, a great NFL receiver that's worthy of that first round selection. He did, for context, go to JUCO to start off his college career, then transferred to Arizona State, and a couple years later broke out as a senior there. So still an outlier for sure. And then you look at the other 10, that is when the strong correlation comes in. Not very good, especially when you compare to the rounds that they were drafted in. And I know what you're thinking. It's only the last few years. They have a shot at still being successful in the NFL. There is a very strong history that says otherwise. If you don't do really anything as a rookie, the chance that you're going to be success in the NFL is very low. Trey Tucker, for example, there was argument about that. He only had 1 game last year over 2 receptions. The only strong, in quotes, outlier is Devontae Parker of this, where he had a pretty bad rookie year, didn't really do anything, and then ended up becoming a solid role player. Then you have the opposite. Here's the day 3 picks from the last 20 years and then just the last 5 years. They're round drafted in their breakout age. The thing that makes this just 1,000 times better is you have to think the late round guys usually don't have as good of breakout ages. Only about 10 to 20% of these guys have a good breakout age. So when you look at the last 20 years, just this insane list of absolute studs, the fact that 7 out of the 9 of them are sub 20 in terms of their breakout age is just so impressive. Tyreek, as we said, utility player, went to community college, and then you have Brandon Marshall as that outlier, and Brandon Lloyd is kind of in that middle there. Even the last 5 years, obviously, there's not a ton of day 3 guys that do a ton in the NFL right now, but there's still solid role players like Mooney became a starter after being a 5th round pick. Gabe Davis just got a big contract after being a 4th round pick. Romeo Doubs looks solid, and I'm a big Wicks fan as well. Now the top 24 guys from this draft class and their breakout age. I also want to point out the early declare because it doesn't look like there's many. The reason that is going back to 2010. From 2010 to 2021, the early declares increased every single year, getting up to 130 early declares in 2021. But then what happened in 2021? COVID and NIL. The combo of those two, getting a 6th year and then NIL kind of, encouraging more guys to go back to school. This year in total, there is 58 early declares, nearly 100 less. That is the fewest since 2010. Starting off with Worthy, it is a good sign. It's not adjusted, by the way, because this was pre-Adonai Mitchell, because Adonai Mitchell was at Georgia. But it shocks me that Mitchell is going to be drafted first because Worthy was significantly more efficient when they were on the same team with obviously the same quarterback. and just a better career all the way back to when he was dominating as a freshman. He had 12 touchdowns as a true freshman. And as I said, I don't really care as much if you have a great breakout age in terms of being an early round guy, but it definitely doesn't hurt, especially when it is this good in that 99th percentile area. Coleman, I'm back and forth on because I loved him as a sophomore. This is part of it. 18.8 breakout age because it is adjusted for Jaden Reed because he was at MSU before he transferred to FSU. But same as Adonai Mitchell. I know I just said it wrong. It's Adonai Mitchell. Johnny Wilson, same exact offense, same exact quarterback, same exact everything. I know FSU was the problem for Keon Coleman, but Wilson out-targeted him and he was way more efficient. So that's what I'm worried about with him. Cowing is a guy that I would like to point out because he has that 19.1 breakout age, but he's probably not going to go until day 3. So he is the prototypical guy that I'm talking about where I like him just because of that if I knew nothing else about him. He is a very rare case where he broke out as a freshman at UTEP, so an 18.6 breakout age, and I adjusted it negatively, but he's not an early declare, and he's also not a 4th-year guy. He's a 5th-year guy, and you just rarely see a guy break out as a freshman and then stay all 5 years in college. When it comes to the Washington receivers, this is against consensus. Polk is above McMillan basically everywhere you look, but McMillan has a very good breakout age where Polk really didn't break out until much later. Odunze, obviously, an elite breakout age. He was awesome from the get-go. Adonai Mitchell is starred because in terms of his breakout age, it's tough. He's basically like the Jalen Waddle of this class. Freshman year, he was great. He didn't hit that 20% mark, but by the time the playoffs came around, he was probably their second best receiver if you don't count Bowers at tight end. Then, sophomore year, he was going to be that Pickens replacement, but then he got injured, so he barely played. 7 touchdowns at Georgia, 4 of them came in those playoffs. So then he transferred to Texas, but it wasn't because of playing time. It was because he had a daughter back home in Texas. So he goes there, breaks out with Xavier Worthy. That's why it's adjusted, but it's at the same time, like he was good enough as a freshman, really. He just didn't hit those numbers and then was injured. Now going down the list, Brendan Rice, 4th-year breakout with Addison. Pearsall was a 3rd-year breakout with Jaden Daniels there all 3 years. And then we get to Devontae Walker. A lot of people will probably think he's a justifiable guy because of his NCAA eligibility problems, but he did transfer from a smaller school to Kent State and then transferred to UNC. But before he transferred to UNC, he did play a full season with Kent State and he had 100 rec yards. So that is why it's not justifiable to me, is because if he didn't have that year of just 100 yards, then it's like, yeah, the COVID season, all of his problems, going to UNC, then breaking out, but he had that chance to break out and didn't really get close. When it comes to Xavier Legette, I get it because he played quarterback in high school, he had off the field problems, but for me, it's not justifiable because it's not like he broke out in his 3rd year and we're justifying for his first couple of years. He broke out as a 5th-year senior, and in his 4th year, he did play every single game, and he only had 160 yards. So for that reason, I just kind of keep it at 22.6. McCaffrey is that guy for me that is actually justifiable because he didn't play receiver until 2 years ago, and he broke out in his very first year playing receiver. So who knows what would happen if he played receiver like he probably should have at Nebraska to start with instead of playing quarterback. These are the 8 guys that I'd watch out for in the draft. 4 more positive, 4 more negative, and their projected round. Xavier Worthy, obviously not much of a value, but the other 3 I would love if my team grabbed them late just because they do have potential upside in my opinion. The other 4 guys are just a lot more risky. They can totally work out. It's happened before, it'll happen again, but receiver is already the position that is least likely to hit on the round 1 guys or round 2, round 3. The top guys, it's just harder to find a receiver that's actually going to work out in the NFL. So these guys with major red flags, I wouldn't want to mess with. I get to research fantasy football and the NFL draft for 40 hours a week, which I love. The problem, I have a bunch of useless information in my head that I need to get out. So follow along and I'll love you.